Live, where news comes first. This is ABC-7 Extra.
Good evening, I'm Maria Garcia. Welcome to ABC-7 Extra. Tonight we're talking about one of the most important projects the city of El Paso promised to voters. It's something that has become a prime example of how the city may have underfunded some projects approved by voters in the 2012 Quality of Life Bond. We're talking about the Cultural Heritage Center voters approved then. Now, the city allocated $5.7 million for the project, but it's become pretty clear the city manager even saying that's just not enough for a standalone, well-equipped facility. They're looking for a site for it, most likely downtown. That's why we're looking at downtown video. Now, on top of that, another issue is brewing. A group of prominent community leaders and activists want City Council to ensure the facility focuses on the Mexican-American experience as it was promised as a cultural center. But others have said that naming it a Mexican-American Cultural Institute would exclude other ethnic groups important to the El Paso area. Joining us tonight, City Representative Limon, also Bernie Sargent, Chair of the Bond Oversight Advisory Committee. You can email us your comments and your questions now to ABC7Extra@KVIA.com or by phone. We're at 496-1775. Tweet me at MariaGABC7 or use the hashtag ABC7Extra. Now, we already have some comments coming in from our viewers, and we're going to get to that in our discussion in just a bit. But first, let's take a look at what happened this week.
Unidad. This is community. This is people coming together and saying, we want to be a part of this.
City Rep Limon says something is off when a swimming pool gets more money than the $5.7 million Hispanic Cultural Center, one of the main projects in the Quality of Life Bond.
Let me just give you an example to show you. Not too long ago, Council approved adding additional money for a swimming pool and added $5 million. That pool had $8 million to begin with.
Dozens of community leaders agreed with Limon. City Manager Tommy Gonzalez has repeatedly said $5.7 million is not enough to acquire land, design, build, and equip a state-of-the-art Hispanic Cultural Center.
We would like our voices and our ideas to be heard as the process continues.
City Council heard from a group calling itself the Mexican-American Cultural Institute, or MASI. It pointed out El Paso's population is 83% Mexican-American, yet our city is one of the only major American cities without a Hispanic Cultural Center.
Our children can go to places, go on field trips, but they don't see themselves, they don't see their culture.
And this is what MASI wants. They want more money allocated for the project, and they want it to be a standalone center, not shared with the Children's Museum. They want to be an active part in the development of the Cultural Center.
We don't want a design company coming in and telling us what our facility should look like.
And the City Council on Tuesday gave the city attorney the green light to write a resolution to form a subcommittee that would make recommendations on the Cultural Center. MASI wants the center to be called the Mexican-American Cultural Institute, but some city reps say they want to hold off on deciding on a name, thinking that may exclude other cultures. That leads us to our discussion. Joining us are City Representative Limon and Bernie Sargent, the Chair of the Bond Oversight Advisory Committee. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for inviting.
Thank you. Thank you. Representative Limon, what are your thoughts? Bernie, I know you wrote a letter to the Times this week. What are your thoughts on Bernie's suggestion that voters approved a cultural center that should represent more than the Mexican-American experience?
Well, quite frankly, I was startled by that kind of a comment. If we go back to the Quality of Life Bond issue, it was a cultural center. City Council then passed the ordinance and named it a Hispanic Cultural Center, devoted it to that particular aspect. I took the time to go back and look precisely at the Bond Oversight Committee and looked at their agendas. And going back as late as November 7th of 2013, their agendas have reflected Hispanic Cultural Center. So as the chair of that oversight committee, I'm wondering why, as of late, why now comes the question that it shouldn't be a Hispanic or a Mexican American cultural center. It's rather surprising since that bond oversight had it on their agenda for so long. Most recently, HKS provided us with a report, and the report clearly states Hispanic Cultural Center. Again, I think that we're now talking about something that's already been resolved. The voters voted on this, approved it. We just need to go forward. And to think, or for anyone to say that the Mexican American Cultural Institute would be one that would leave other cultures aside is totally incorrect. It is not the emphasis of this group to do that. It's quite the opposite, to recognize all of the many, many cultures that have come and added. But primarily, if you look at it, 81% Mexican American culture, then that's what we need to celebrate.
And I want to get to the point that you said you looked at some of the city documents, some of the BOAC documents to see, what's at Hispanic Cultural Center. I know you sent me something, Bernie, but we also did some research. And if we can take those images, if we have them, even on the city website right now, it still says Hispanic Cultural Center in several documents. This is the PowerPoint that the City Council saw before they voted. You can see it says Urban Planning Services for Hispanic Cultural Center. This is the map that is still on the city website. It says Hispanic Cultural Center. These are all of the projects for the quality of life bond. This is the contract with one of the companies that is handling the site search for these projects. Still says Hispanic Cultural Center. So Bernie, on the ballot though, it doesn't say Hispanic Cultural Center.
It does not.
But for people who say it's very clear it was meant to be Hispanic Cultural Center, the city referred to it as Hispanic Cultural Center for months. Every city document says Hispanic Cultural Center. And for people who say it's troubling that someone who's in charge of the BOAC is saying that it's supposed to be something else because of a technicality. What do you think about that?
Technicality, we voted for a cultural center, and with all due respect, the paperwork that was presented to the BOAC with regards to what we call it came from the city. We did not prepare the agenda. That was prepared by the city. And we did question that right from the get-go, that's not what it said on the ballot that the folks voted for. And so I stick with that. I voted for a cultural center which is inclusive, not exclusive to the Hispanics, not exclusive to any the Native Americans, the blacks, the Asians, the Middle Easterns. It's inclusive, and I still would like to see it be more neutral than saying Mexican American, or because even if you say Mexican American, you're excluding some portion of the Hispanic community because they're not all Mexican American. And I just would like to stay with the cultural center because it's more inviting to more people.
Representative Limon, for voters who say, look, I don't have time to check the city website, I don't have time to go to city council meetings, but I made the time to go to the polls, I voted for what was on the ballot, and the ballot, what I voted for, what matters, did not say Hispanic Cultural Center. It only said Cultural Center. That's what I voted for. That's what I feel I was promised by the city, and that's what I want.
And that's correct. We do vote for that. But then city council, we voted on these general topics, and then through an ordinance, city council designated what it was going to be. I feel and I understand Bernie's situation. If you look at the agendas, the Bond Oversight Committee really has no authority. If you look at the agenda consistently, there are only 2 times where they have any action. That is when they select officers and when they approve their minutes. Every other item on their agenda is listed as discussion only. They have no authority. They can fret about it, they can worry about it, but if you really look at it, they have no authority.
But they have a responsibility,
A
don't
responsibility.
they? I mean, a responsibility to ensure that the projects are implemented the way the voters approved them. Essentially, is that...
But what I'm saying is, what power do they have when they don't have the power to vote and to take action? They don't. All they do is discuss. And primarily, the departments give presentations. They listen to them. But I can assure you that there is no action because their agendas don't reflect it as such. Is that correct, Bernie? That you don't take action?
No, we don't. But what our mission is to relay to our constituency as well as to the people that appoint us what the discussions were and what the sentiment is from the public and from the BOAC. So we don't have authority to enact anything, but we do have impact or influence. So there's a little bit of a difference there.
Okay.
You know, if the BOAC had absolutely no authority, why are they even in any existence? You know, we were required to be there, as another comment that the City Council made, a commitment to the public that they would have the bond overview committee to act as an advisory committee to the City Council. I'm the mayor's appointee, and also to the citizenry.
Okay, we have some comments. Michael says El Paso is next to Mexico, and the majority of people here, majority of El Pasoans are from Mexican descent. It should be a Mexican-American Cultural Institute. Mark says multicultural center might be a good idea. It's inclusive and not exclusive. We'll be right back. We have a lot more of your comments coming up. You're watching ABC-7 Extra. Remember, you can email us at ABC7Extra at KVIA.com, tweet me at Maria G ABC7, or you can call us at 496-1775. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. We're talking about the Hispanic Cultural Center today. Representative Limon, the city manager has repeatedly said that $5.7 million is just not enough to acquire land, to build, and to equip a standalone, state-of-the-art cultural center. That sounds concerning for taxpayers, I think.
It is. It should be. If anyone had really taken the time when the projects were, where the funding was allocated, and had really, truly done some research, they would have very easily found out that that was just an inadequate amount. You take a comparison with other key cities in the United States, and you're going to see that for the square footage, what we have allocated is a slap in the face. And quite frankly, it almost looked like it was a bone thrown at. Let's keep them quiet, let's give them something, let's just build a little something. We cannot afford, as a city with the greatest population of Mexican-American community, do something that is not a world-class facility. All we need to do is look at other cities that celebrate their heritage and how important that is. That's where we need to be.
Bernie, the last quality of life project that we talked about that was underfunded was that West Side pool. The city ended up shifting some funds around, and now because of that, this West Side Park that was also part of the quality of life bond may eventually not get built. If we encounter more projects that were underfunded, that the cost was essentially underestimated, and the city starts chipping away at other projects that were promised to voters, I mean, isn't that concerning in the long run? Aren't we getting less bang for our buck?
It's very concerning, and I think one of the most telling slides that the consultant showed us was the increase by year of the projects, the cost for the projects. And it was very easy to see, and most of us sitting on the BOAC early on saw that these projects aren't going to get cheaper as time goes on. So one of the things that we're trying to convey upon the city and upon the engineering firms, consultants, is how do we consolidate these to get the best bang for the buck? You know, what can you buy, what can you purchase all at one time that will be synonymous with all the other projects or some of the other projects, so that even though they might start on this park in 2 or 3 years, you know, the raw materials or whatever are purchased today and stored for the construction is going to take place in a couple of years. So there's all kinds of things we're trying to come up with, ways to help the city. You know, considering the city's right now is about $2 billion in debt, we can't afford to overextend ourselves anymore.
And we're going to talk a little bit about the maintenance of these projects in just a bit, which is also expensive. First, some tweets. Cindy says, I remember voting for a cultural center, not a Hispanic cultural center. Am I wrong? We talked about that. It wasn't specifically on the ballot, but it was in the ordinance that City Council approved and other city literature. The one and only AP says, that is the problem with many things. Instead of thinking of Mexican Americans or African Americans, why not just a cultural center? All this Mexican, African stuff, we're missing the point. We are all Americans. Let's celebrate that. And Bernie Jaime Abetia says Bernie is talking about being more inviting to more people, while the El Paso County Historical Commission, which he chairs, is almost all white. Do you want to address that?
It's not almost all white. The thing is, they are appointed by the County Commissioners Court. The folks that we have on that commission, I have no choice as to who comes on the commission. It's all up to the Commissioners Court as to who's appointed. We don't have all white people on there. We do have Hispanics on there. We have a lot of ladies on there. So it's pretty spread out. And we invite anybody and everybody that wants to become part of the commission. Please let me know.
Okay, Ms. Limon?
You know, I think it's real important for people to understand when you talk about the Mexican American Cultural Institute, right off the bat I can tell you that that institute, that cultural center, would not be true and active and reflective of the history of its people without a full mentioning of people like George McCallman, who had such a tremendous impact on so many people. Nolan Richardson. These are people from our own community. It is not a center that's designed to exclude anybody. It's quite the opposite, to celebrate all of its people. You look at a lot of the people that came to El Paso, many of them came through Mexico, the Lebanese, our community that came in through that country. They had to have the citizenship in Mexico before they came into the United States to immigrate. This is not about excluding anyone. Give us the opportunity to show how rich and fulfilling this center can be.
Okay, we have to take another break. We'll be right back. We're going to talk about the maintenance of some of these projects, so stay with us. Remember, 496-1775, ABC-7 Extra at KVIA.com, or tweet me at MariaGABC7. We'll be right back. Welcome back to ABC-7 Extra. We're talking about the Cultural Center approved by voters in 2012 here in El Paso. Let's talk about the maintenance that goes into these projects that voters approved in 2012. I mean, nearly $500 million worth of projects. El Pasoans overwhelmingly approved, but that comes with maintenance. Voters approved the money to build them, but that did include the money to maintain them. For example, the new digital wall downtown, I mean, it's beautiful. It really is a sight to see, but it comes with maintenance costs, more than $20,000 a year for a security guard, $40,000 a year for a new curator. And then the first year is free, but after that, about $83,000 a year, the contract with the company that made it to service it. So that's more than like $140,000 a year in maintenance for one project. How's the city going to balance that plus the debt that it's taken on to build these projects?
It's a question that more and more people are beginning to ask as we as we see our taxes elevate, and it's disconcerting. I know a couple of folks on the BOAC are bankers, and they'll sit there just puzzled, going, we're not even talking about staffing, utilities, maintenance. We have to look at those things as we go forward. Mm-hmm. You're right. You're absolutely right.
And you know, I know that the city manager, Tommy Gonzalez, has said, you know, there are ways to make them more cost efficient. But I mean, generally, we're talking about parks and libraries and public service facilities that just, they're not money makers. I mean, maybe you can balance it out a little bit, but they don't make money generally. Representative Limon, but they cost money.
They do. And I think this is what's significant about this particular project. It's a cultural center. It's not a museum. So it's not like we've got to gather all of these artifacts and put them on the walls. A cultural center is a live center. It is where you will have people coming and going, lots and lots of activities. I will tell you that I had a chance to visit the MAC, the Mexican American Cultural Center in Austin, just last week. And that is really puzzling to me, how it can be under the direction of Parks and Recreation versus Museum and Cultural Affairs. It's not going to succeed, and so consequently, when the money comes short, then that's where you start cutting. You start cutting on Parks and Rec. This museum has got to be a world-class, not this museum, this cultural center must be a world-class center. If you ever had a chance to visit the Rodadora in Juarez, it is full of children. The Children's Museum, it is magnificent. I mean, we have a lot to be proud of. I don't know that we will be able to reach at that level. This is a museum that is joint with the Smithsonian and National Geographic. I mean, that's what we have right across the bridge from us. It's a magnificent place. And so that's the kind of energy that we want here. We don't want a static display. We want a facility that is alive, is going to encourage, and we've got to make sure that we connect with the students in the school district, that they come out and take a visit and be an active part.
But again, 5.7 million is
Not
not
enough.
enough for what you're
Not
talking
enough.
about. And,
Not
and
enough.
a group of residents, supporters of the Children's Museum that voters approved here in El Paso in 2012, committed to raising $10 million for the Children's Museum for it to be a standalone facility. You heard City Rep Courtney Nyland this week saying that the Community Foundation, which is working as a fiscal agent for the people who want to raise money for the Children's Museum, is willing to do that for Massey if Massey wants to raise money for the Cultural Center. Is that something Massey will do?
Absolutely, yes. But first of all, we need to make sure that we have the design. We want to know what it's going to look like, because the city needs to come up. Maybe the city can't bring it to the full cost, but the city needs to add additional money. I tell you, if we can add $5 million for a swimming pool, how much more important is a Mexican American Cultural Institute Center for this community? You talk about tourism, you talk about influence. I mean, it is just a magnificent idea. And so the city needs to really come to realization that when this was proposed, not enough funding was given. Just give them a bone and they're going to be happy. No, we're not happy. We want the city to come up to the level, and then perhaps beyond that, that Massey can come in with exhibits, with touring visitors, all of these kinds of things that will make it a richer place.
Okay, I just want to read some tweets real quick. The one and only AP says, the problem with the city is that there's no clear marketing idea to attract people to different venues. Fernando says, I am American and Mexican. I am not Hispanic. I don't like the direct association between Mexico and España. They're telling me we're out of time, so I have to go. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you so
Thanks.
much, Bernie. We appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching ABC-7 Extra. We ran a little heavy because of the Oscars, but glad you were with us. We'll see you next week. Good night.